Today, we're talking about rewiring your beliefs and shifting painful emotions instantly with a modality called Theta Healing. And with me today is a very dear friend and colleague, Sanaiyah Gurnamal. Hey, Sanaya, how are you doing?
I'm great, Karen. It is always wonderful to connect with you, whether we're just chatting as friends or I'm here on your podcast to talk about some of these really amazing things that
Yeah.
can happen with data healing.
So, folks, I met Sanaya about 3 years ago, and I had heard of Theta Healing. I had actually had a not great experience with it, and I was struggling with some of my own beliefs that were causing emotional distress. And I am very open to different modalities. And Sanaya and I talked, and I invested in a couple of sessions to see if it would make a difference. And I've used the word miraculous more than once in terms of the impact of theta healing on my life. And so here you are, you're going through one of the most difficult transitions of your life. There's a lot of history, and often it dates back to our family of origin, and we create ways of thinking, and we get caught in beliefs that were kind of planted in us early on in life. And it has such a huge impact. And so, with so many of the clients I work with, the ability to help them shift gets stuck at a certain point because they're operating with unconscious limiting beliefs that coaching can't really get to because we're dealing with like your executive functioning mind. And so I wanted to invite Sanaya on today to talk about what is this theta healing? Why do we get stuck? And why do we need something more than talk therapy or coaching sometimes to truly get unstuck and create the life that we each want? And so that's the conversation we're going to have today. Sanaya, I'm just so tickled to have you on and to have you share your brilliant skill with our listeners.
Thank you, Karen. I think you set up the whole conversation so perfectly because it really is about these things that we're carrying that often we are unaware of or we don't know what to do about it. And having a path, a technique, a way of digging deep into those things that sometimes, like you said, coaching can't get to is really what is, I would say, is the missing ingredient for a lot of people in their own journeys, especially the ones that require deep healing.
And I think that it's actually compounded. Like when I think about my situation, and I'll just share with the audience, the first thing I came to Sanaya with was my mom had passed away a couple of years ago, and I was walking around like a bad girl. And I told her I have this bad girl dread. Remember, that was the term that I used.
For
And
sure. Yeah.
just like this thing that was dogging me. But what made it worse was my then self judgment on myself. And so it's like
Yeah.
all of our beliefs can kind of pile on top of each other and just cause a big crash. And then we're like, I'm stuck. And I was stuck and I was thinking, my life is pretty good. My mom is gone. She doesn't think I'm a bad girl, but I have this thing that I can't get rid of. And it felt like this very deep root. And I feel like each of you, probably as you're listening, name that deep root, that where you're stuck, where you just run into a wall over and over again. And
Yeah.
it might be a belief about yourself or about your spouse or about what's not possible. And so, can you define theta healing to just kick us
Yeah.
off? And then let's see where the conversation goes.
Absolutely. I do want to say something though, Karen, about your belief that was kind of repeating over and over in your mind. It was like in the background, right? That I'm a bad girl, I'm not good enough, and so on. And you mentioned how it was something you picked up from your childhood. And what is very interesting about the work I do with theta healing is that we often have this voice in our head. You can call it the inner critic voice, but
Right.
that voice may sound like I'm not good enough, I'm a bad girl, I always mess up, or nobody loves me, whatever that repeating voice in your head is often not your own. It's
Right.
somebody else's voice. You heard it from somebody else. You took it on from somebody else who at that time decided that was how you were going to be labeled. Maybe it was a certain incident or something that happened over and over again, but you took that on as part of your identity. And as you grew up, it became something that you almost fulfilled and reaffirmed over and over again until it just became part of who you are. You didn't know the difference between that identity that was, in a sense, put on you, projected on you, given to you, that you took on, right?
Right.
And you can't let it go. You can't get away from it. You can't turn it off. And often that's the part of us that sabotages our relationships, our success, our career trajectories. There's so many things that get affected or influenced by this kind of this voice in our head that keeps telling us we can't move forward or we shouldn't or we're not allowed to. So going into what theta healing is, it is essentially a technique. It blends spiritual work with, I would say, the coaching framework of digging deep into your subconscious to find what is that bottom belief and where did it come from. So if I were to use you as an example, Karen, the thought that I'm a bad girl, well, why do you think that way? And where did you first hear that? Who told you that? And why did you take that on? Of all the things that was said to you, why did that one strike a chord? Why did that one hit the nerve for you? And why did you decide to bring it forward in your life and keep it running in the background for you? What was the reason? And often there's a lesson hidden in that. There's some kind of opportunity for growth in that, which is why we take on these difficult, challenging identities. And in your case, you had to go back and deal with the trauma. You had to release some resentment and emotions. And we had to go down into doing some inner child work, some forgiveness work. We did a lot of deep healing at the point where that identity got taken on. And I'm calling it an identity, but you can also call it your belief system. It could be the way you're programmed. It could be the lens with which you view the world. It could be how you understand yourself. But it is something that you don't need to actually take with you. You can actually choose to let it go and replace it with something more empowering. So theta healing is a technique that allows you to dig down and find those limiting beliefs, those limiting negative emotions, the trauma, those experiences that are hurting you more than they are helping you, and instantly. So we've used that word very intentionally, both Karen and I, because it can be truly instant, where you could feel completely like your whole world is falling apart. And after a healing, which might take 5 minutes, you could feel like a different person. And the best part about it is it sticks. It's not one of those things that you feel good for like an hour and then you're back to where you started, or even the next day or the following week. It's done. And I have to share this one story, Karen, because I think you will completely relate to this, that I had a client come to me who was not able to get over an ex. And this was just completely taking over his life, where he was dating new people, but he couldn't get someone else out of his head. And he kept comparing his future to his past. And so he was stuck there and he couldn't move forward. And obviously he hated it because things didn't end really well. So every time he was thinking about her, he just felt worse about himself. And so he was stuck in the cycle. And he's been doing therapy for years. Okay. He's been doing lots of different things, but he came to me and he was very skeptical. And he's like, I don't even know if this is going to work, but someone recommended you. It was actually you. And I'm going to try it. And after our 60-minute session, he was still skeptical. I don't know if this is going to work. But then he wrote me an email a couple of hours later and he said, I don't know what happened, but 10 minutes after our session, I just started feeling so much better. And I feel like something has shifted. And we met a week later and he's like, I don't know what you did, Sanaya, but it's gone. I can't find it anymore. Like, I do not think about this person. I'm so over it. I've let it go. And for the first time, I actually feel like I can breathe and focus on my new relationship. And of course, it was a shock for him.
And he was very skeptical. I remember that. For me, at the end of our session, Sanaya basically looked at me and said, "It is done." And I was like, "What do you mean it's done?" And she's like, "It's done. It's gone." And I was like, "WTF, it's not gone. It can't be gone." And she said, "You go find it. You go find it and you let me know." And that was almost a year ago, if not more. And if I tell you, I had this bad girl dread, and it would show up if I was having a glass of wine during the week, or if I ended my day at 3 o'clock, like silly things. If I was not being productive enough, which was my mom's thing, you always had to be very, very productive. And if I tell you, I searched high and low for anything, scanning myself for this bad girl dread. And that's why I call it miraculous. It was gone, just gone. And Sanaya, I want to bring another layer to what my audience is dealing with. And so I agree, so much of this stuff is planted in our childhood, but most of my audience went out and married some version of mom or dad. So they engaged in a really difficult, toxic, dysfunctional something marriage for years or decades. And so, as did I. So the messaging I got from my childhood was very similar to the messaging I ended up manifesting in my husband and what I would get from him. And so when I'm talking to my clients, there's their inner critic, and then there's their spouse, and those voices don't always sound very different, and it's compounding it. And I wonder the impact that has on our debilitating belief of ourselves then, because now it's not just the historical voice, it's the voice of the person that you fell in love with and that you're sharing a life with, that's really traumatizing you. So can you just, and I know I've recommended a number of people go to Sanaya coming out of difficult relationships. And can you just talk about how does that work when you're working with someone and it's that compounded belief system?
Yeah, I first of all, I love that question, Karen, because it's so obvious to you and me, right? That we end up marrying usually one of our parents, or we repeat the marriage that they had in some way. But for most people, it's not that obvious, right? They're right in the middle of it, and they can't see that all they did was recreate the same situation they either saw with their parents, or they recreated one of their parent as their spouse. So what I mean is, if you had a very dominating father, for example, he was a very tough person, he was emotionally unavailable to you as a father, you might actually marry a man who is also, or eventually becomes, completely shut off from you, emotionally unavailable. Or if you had a very critical mom, then you marry a partner who's critical of you. So it doesn't always present when you start dating, right? And often it doesn't even show up until you're well into the relationship, you're too deep in, right? And you're already completely invested, and it's too late to turn around and walk out because you're invested. But it does show up. I've seen it over and over again with all my clients, and I have worked with thousands and thousands of people over the last 15 years. So I know this pattern so well. And it's very interesting because you essentially already have that kind of limiting belief, that inner critic voice, whatever is going on in your own space that is holding you back or keeping you stuck in some kind of situation. And then now you've got a spouse that's playing the very role that challenged you as a child. And that's the compounded effect that you're talking about, is like it's a double whammy, because you already have that and now you're reenacting that with your spouse. And the thing is, when we grow up, we have these dreams and ideas about our partner and what they will do for us, right? We think they are going to support us and they're going to be that perfect partner to us and our life is going to be perfect. So it's an even bigger fall.
Right.
Because we have set ourselves up for completely unrealistic expectations because we're actually running away from what we grew up with. And we think that other person that we're going to find one day is going to correct it for us, is going to make it right. And instead of making it right, we actually just recreate the same situation that we were running away from.
So I don't know if you've ever read Getting the Love You Want, Harville Hendricks and Helen Hunt.
Okay.
And they talk about exactly that. They're the founders of Imago therapy, and they talk about how you marry the wounds of your mother and father, a mixture of the
100%.
two, one or the other. And that in healthy relationships, what happens, it's like, I see you, I hold space for you, you go do your healing, I see you, I hold space for you. In my clients' relationships where they've married somebody who's particularly difficult or inflexible or traumatized or disordered or whatever, there isn't that safe space. And so it's just salt in the wounds. And now, years later, I can see how I was also salt in my spouse's wound, and he was salt in mine. And I want to shift the conversation because one of the things that I just think is so brilliant about the work that you do is when we say instantaneously, it's really instantaneously. And one of the things that I have found to be hard in talk therapy, and I know talk therapy can be incredibly helpful, is you kind of relive the whole bloody thing because you're talking it through. And as a child of sexual assault and rape, like working through that was so painful. And yet when I came to you, we talked about mom, we talked about my experience, but within 1 hour, so what Sanaya just said before probably sounded like a 6-month journey. In 1 hour, we're talking about what do you think and what do you believe and what was your mom's role? And I remember you saying, what was the positive that came out of that, which totally stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, what do you mean the positive that came out of that? And really helping me look at what was the silver lining, because everything is something that we're going to grow from. So I would love to just kind of hand it over to you to walk through. Somebody comes to you, and if you could use an example that would resonate with the audience, and then there's a whole process that you go through. Can you share a little bit of what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with something that I share with my students and my clients, which is everything in your life is not happening to you, it's happening for you, right? So most people come into relationship challenges blaming the other person for why the relationship is failing or struggling. And that's actually the problem, is you get stuck in blaming the other person and we don't take responsibility for how we have contributed to that situation, how we might have chosen it, or how we have, it's a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow, but that we have a sense of responsibility in the breakdown. Okay. And what I found is when we can see what that situation has been teaching us all along, and there always is something positive that we are learning. Maybe we're learning patience. Maybe we're learning to love ourselves, which happens a lot in some of the work I've seen. Maybe we're learning to set boundaries or to express ourselves, right? And unfortunately, our partner happens to be the one that forces us to learn these lessons through very painful and difficult ways. And so it's easier to blame them because they are the cause for why we are now challenged by the situation, but they are also the catalyst for our growth. And so if we can shift from seeing them as, in a way, allowing us or creating the space for us to learn something very positive, then it doesn't become about them anymore. It becomes about you, and the focus comes back to you. And when you can learn that positive thing that you need to learn in a very difficult situation, what I have seen over and over again is the situation resolves. It goes away. And I know it sounds as crazy as our instant relief, instant emotional healing, but it is as simple as that. That when you learn what you need to learn, when you have made your peace with a situation where there's acceptance and forgiveness and letting go, right? And maybe just honoring of what happened, right? It happened. But look, all these other things happened that I can see are positive as well.
And I think that my journey through my 3.5 year difficult divorce and then co-parenting and single parenting, like the entire thing was just a journey of evolving into a better version of myself. Like I would say the last 19 years, I think I was fairly unconscious until I slammed into my divorce. And from that point forward, to your point, it was hard. It brought me to my knees numerous times. But and I think that you don't always grow. I think that's a choice. I think the people listening to this podcast are the people who stretch into growing. I think many of the people that they're married to get stuck in the I'm the victim, you're the bad guy. So it does. It's this work, and you've heard me say this so many times. This work it's for the courageous. It takes a lot of courage to look in the mirror and say, what is going on with me? And how did I contribute to this? And how is this for me? And then the stretching is scary a lot of times, right? It's like, I know so many people who come toe to toe with their comfort zone and then they're like, I'm out. It's like, no, you're just about to experience the promise. Push through it. Don't be afraid. Like, I have an article, Possibility Lives on the Other Side of Our Comfort Zone. Let's get through it. And you and I have worked on a number of different issues, and each one of them kind of was this brand new open door for me to catapult forward, not just like baby step forward, but when the depth of these beliefs and feelings are released, it's like taking all the sandbags out of the hot air balloon and you just head in that direction you're desiring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure, Karen, you can look at your own journey and say, I'm proud of who I am today. And if it weren't for all those different challenges, you wouldn't be the person that you are today. And you wouldn't be in the position to help all these people that you are helping. So a lot of times our own challenges also make us the person that eventually lives the purpose they're here for as well. So there's this kind of element of everything that I went through, all my pain is my power now. It is what I am doing for other people. But we do go through these very painful experiences in our life, but how we go through it is our choice, right? No matter what, the challenge is there. But whether I'm going to resist and kick and scream and blame other people and throw a tantrum, or I'm going to say, all right, it's here. What am I going to do about the situation? What's the opportunity for me? How can I grow?
I'm going to set a stage for what a bunch of people are thinking right now. I'm in the thick of divorce. He or she is trying to wrangle the kids or the money from me. They're being difficult. They're causing us to have all this additional legal fees. We're talking to people who are 2, 3, 4. I just met a woman who took 15 years and it wasn't her at all. She was just married to someone severely disordered. And so I get that slippery slope tendency to be like, again, I have something that I need to learn, but this person is crushing me. This purpose, and in many cases, intentionally, maybe even enjoying the chaos and conflict that's coming with it. And I think that you have a and still and yet statement for people, even given all of that I described. And within that context, so that they understand that you understand, and there's still a and yet.
Right. So I actually have a client that I worked with that would resonate, I think, with your audience. One of my clients had been married for 25 years to a man who she didn't have much of a connection with. She stopped working to take care of the children and spent her whole life taking care of the children, raising the children. And she was extremely lonely in her marriage, extremely unfulfilled. And one day she decided she was going to get a divorce. Okay. But she had no job, she had no income. And she knew that the man she was married to at that time was not going to give her anything because he was that kind of a person. Like, he was spiteful. If she tried to leave him, he would cut her off completely. He would play dirty. Okay. And he was completely emotionally messing with her head, gaslighting her, all of those things, making her think that she could never do it. It was bad. It was really bad. So that's where we started. Okay. And we started working through everything that had led up to that marriage. And a lot of her lessons came from us unpacking the story with her mother and father. She had an alcoholic father. He was abusive towards her mother. So when she entered into an abusive marriage, it wasn't that, it wasn't that strange for her. It was familiar. It was something she grew up with. And so she repeated a lot of the behaviors that her mother repeated with her father. And so, in many ways, she allowed her marriage to take away everything from her. She allowed it. She didn't stand up. She didn't use her voice because, again, this is something so normal for her. That's what she grew up with.
I was told that by a therapist too, that your tolerance, when you grow up with it, you have this higher tolerance and it's almost like it becomes normalized and then you're in it again as an adult.
And you don't see anything wrong with it until it's too late.
Yeah.
Right. And by then, again, it's so far gone, you can't even figure out how to get out of the mess. Right. So we started first with building up her self-esteem, understanding why she made these choices, what she needed to learn, what peace she had to make with her past. She had to forgive her father. Like, we had to do all that work with her father and mother wounds, with her inner child wounds. So we started with all of that. And then we started working on the trauma from her marriage with her husband. Right. And then we worked on courage. We worked on getting her to a point where she felt like, even though it meant she might walk away with nothing and have to start from the beginning, that it was still about being true to herself and having integrity. And so we got her to a point. This is all because she wanted it. So we got her to a point where she was ready to file. And then, of course, when she did file for divorce, it got really ugly and it got really messy. Right. And she almost wanted to give up. But then we started to work on, her resentment towards her partner. We worked on the trauma, so there are a lot of different things we did with that. But eventually, just by working with her, I never saw her husband. I didn't deal with anyone else except her. But by the time we were done working together, her husband gave her a settlement that was beyond the number she and I had decided in her head, that she wanted a certain number to start her life. And he gave her a lot more than that without any fight, without any struggle. They actually went into mediation and it was smooth. Okay. It was completely the opposite of what she was braced for. And they actually live next door to each other.
Oh my God.
Yes. She moved out and got the apartment next door. And they are friends, oddly enough. They are no longer married or involved in any romantic way, but there is a sense of respect for each other. And they actually ended up living next to each other, which means obviously the situation is fine, that they could live next to each other. And it was by choice. And they had reasons why they did it that way, but she got what she wanted and it ended smoothly and easily.
And can you give your assessment of how her changing her energy impacted the dynamic between the two of them? Because I think that's a leap for people. It's like, how in the world?
There's a couple of things. First of all, we're teaching people how to treat us all the time by what we will and will not tolerate, right? In addition to that, we are sending out energy to people all the time. So let's say I walk into a room and I know I can tell if someone doesn't like me. I can tell if people are talking behind my back. We just sense these things about people, and people behave differently. So if I were to I walk into a room and let's say you're angry with me, your energy is going to be aggressive with me. You don't even need to say anything. I would be able to feel it. We feel people all the time. And so I'm anticipating a very negative conversation with you. And so I'm ready to fight back. And so we're always doing this with people. We're preempting what we expect out of a conversation with them. And if you are in the middle of a divorce, you're clearly on opposite sides. And there's a reason why you're getting the divorce, right? So you're already setting up a situation for conflict, because divorce is conflict. It's the reason why you're getting a divorce, is because you couldn't resolve. There were a lot of things and it could not be resolved. So you're already programmed to be on opposite sides. You're already programmed for there to be conflict and stress. And so you're walking into that. You're almost anticipating it and behaving that way and inviting that behavior from the other person. But if you go into it with, I want to say love, right? That we had this life together that we built and it didn't work out the way either of us wanted, but I respect you as maybe the father of my children. Okay. Or I respect that we just had differences and we grew apart. Right. And you go in with that gentleness, with that love, with that openness. You don't need to protect yourself, because often we think the worst of people because of our experiences. And so we protect ourselves. And in protecting ourselves, we either push them away, we push their buttons, we trigger each other. So we walk into behaviors that actually creates more stress and conflict in the relationship.
Yeah, no, I think that makes so much sense. What comes to mind for me is divorce someone who is as angry today as he was how many years ago. But during our co-parenting, he wasn't paying the child support and was triggering all my financial issues. And I was angry and I was blaming and shaming and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, I don't recall what happened that brought the shift, but I remember one day just going, well, this isn't working. And I had reached out to him and I said, I know money's really tight, and anything that you could send me would be helpful and deeply appreciated. I'm really trying to like keep these kids' head above water. And I came at him with kindness and like thank you in advance, appreciation. And I'm not going to say there was like a whole lot of love there. I was really, really frustrated and angry, but I did think like, God, this is just tough. It's tough for both of us. And he came back with a response that was like, no, 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 I'm so sorry. I'm behind and I can send you this right now. And he would like thanked me for my graciousness. And I like my jaw hit the ground because that was such an odd response from him. But the truth is, it was a pretty odd response from me.
You got different behavior because you were different.
And that's why I bring this little example up, because I was very different and then going forward, that's just how I chose to deal with it. Was I knew I wasn't going to get my child support check every month. But if I asked in that way, if I came with kindness and gentleness, perhaps I would have a better response. And it didn't change our relationship overall, but when I was able to do that, the impact was right there.
There's a book called Nonviolent Communication, NVC, and it's written by Marshall Rosenberg. And he talks about how when we are in the middle of conflict with another person, we tend to attack them or blame them or point a finger at them, which automatically puts their brain in survival mode. So now they need to defend, right? They're not hearing you anymore because their brain goes into fight or flight. They need to survive this attack, right? And they become like the adrenaline and cortisol actually starts to release in their body really quickly. And so they get aggressive because they're trying to protect themselves. So whenever we go into a conversation with that blaming, anger, shaming, all of that, you are just inviting this kind of behavior back where you're not heard, you're not understood, and you're very unlikely to get to any resolution. So, nonviolent communication is a technique of communicating with other people through empathy, honesty, and self awareness. And the goal is to get to understanding and connection instead of judgment and blame. And so they've done these studies, and it's shown that when you speak to people with empathy, like you did, with understanding, right, with honesty, and you ask for what you need instead of demanding or blaming them for not giving it to you, but you ask for what you need. And it's not about what's right. It's not about what you deserve. It's about, this is what you need for you. Okay. Because of how you feel. So the focus and the emphasis is on you. And you ask for that. Right. And you did the exact thing, Karen. You said, I am trying to keep our kids' head above water. Anything you can give me would be appreciated. You asked, you explained why you needed it, not that he owed it to you, or as the father, he must give it to you, or legally, whatever. You didn't put any of that into the conversation. You simply said, this is for our children. I'm doing my best for them. Whatever you can give me, that was the ask. I would appreciate it. And you set the stage with understanding. I understand that money is tight for you. I get it. Right? So now he was listening, Karen. He wasn't like, oh my God, I got to defend against the attack, against the blame, against all these things she's saying about me. He was actually feeling safe in that conversation with you, which allowed him to be vulnerable back to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true.
So this is something, your listeners can look up. It's called NVC, nonviolent communication, but it is something I teach as well.
Yeah, we'll have that link in the show notes for you. So just take a look and you can check out that book. We're going to stop for a moment for a sponsor break. And when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about the outcome of Theta Healing and then how you guys can find Sanaya. Divorce feels like an overwhelming perfect storm as you navigate pain, fear, and confusion while struggling with unfamiliar legal procedures and the pressure to make complex decisions that will impact the rest of your life. Our free Rapid Relief Call provides the clarity and confidence you're yearning for. Visit rapidreliefcall.com for support and guidance today. So, like this woman that you spoke about was such a great example. You did a variety of sessions, and what was her response to you? Do you remember as she was going through this, was there a lightness that happened along the way?
Confidence, lightness, relief. She was clear about what she wanted. She was able to express herself. Because I think what also happens, Karen, is when we are emotional and we are overcome with anger or resentment, we trigger each other and we say things that we don't necessarily mean or we regret later on, because it actually exacerbates the conflict rather than getting you to any kind of resolution with each other. So it is definitely a skill to be able to communicate and express yourself while still staying calm and staying clear and being very intentional about what you want to communicate, right? And to get that communication heard by the other person.
And just to put a bow on it, in order to get there, like when someone does theta healing, it helps them be able to do that because, can you just kind of wrap a bow around
Because,
that?
yes, absolutely. Because we have released the emotional charges. We have released the triggers. We have released the pain, the trauma, because we're always reacting to what we're carrying within ourselves. So, for example, if you yell at me, right, and it's a one-off situation, maybe it won't be such a big deal. But if I have grown up hearing my father yell at me all the time, the minute you raise your voice, Karen, my entire nervous system like starts to go crazy, right? It starts to react. I get tense. My heart starts racing. My entire physiological response shifts because your loud voice is triggering all those memories of all the times that I was yelled at as a child and I was scared. I was terrified, right? So I'm going to overreact the minute you raise your voice because I'm not reacting to you, Karen, in this moment. I'm reacting to every single memory of my father yelling at me and how it made me feel across all those years. So we tend to overreact because we're not reacting to the situation. We are reacting to our entire history, our past baggage, everything we're carrying.
Right.
And so that's why things get blown out of proportion. That's why we don't react to each other in balanced ways. We're acting from our wounds, we're acting from our pain, our trauma. When I am in a conflict with someone else, I'm bringing everything into it. And unfortunately, we're both doing that.
And so when you go in with somebody and do that work, what happens to that whole history of experiencing my father yelling at me?
We release the trauma. We bring in a lot of forgiveness and understanding. And there's an emphasis on how you've grown, how it has helped you, how it's motivated you. We look at how that negative situation actually did some pretty good things for you. And when you realize that, oh, it wasn't all bad, because I do see the silver lining, I do see how it might have motivated me in my life. For example, my brother was bullied as a child, and he was bullied by his friends. And he made a promise to himself that one day he was going to be so successful that nobody would ever bully him again. Right? So that pain, that trauma drove him to study hard, to work hard, to really commit to the success he wanted to create. And he became one of the most successful hedge fund managers and then owners in the US. And he really did become that person that nobody would ever bully again. So his very painful childhood motivated him in a positive way. Would he have wanted to take that away? Not at the cost of giving up all the success he created. But then I would want him to now redirect from a place of confidence and joy and passion instead of I'm going to prove all those people wrong or I'm going to get my revenge, right? Because he's still trying to prove that he was better than them, right?
So what
at
I'm
one
hearing,
point,
his pain drove him, but then by not healing it, he's got this success, but he still has all of the emotional triggers and what. Oh, gotcha.
And the amazing thing is, you'll get to a point where it's just not working anymore. What was motivating you, what was driving you, what was helping you, that pain, at some point, it's like, I can't do this anymore. Okay. I feel like I'm hurting myself more than anything. And usually, this could be a turning point when people get sick, when people get divorced, when people go into depression, when people struggle in some aspect of their life. And that's when they start looking at these things because they realize it's actually hurting them more than the other people that they were trying to kind of prove themselves to, or the past. And so at that point, they often seek out my services and I work with them to essentially let go of that very negative motivation or driver and replace it with something that's positive. And they might have already created great success with that very negative motivation. But when we replace it with something more positive, they actually skyrocket to their next level. Like it gets even easier, it gets even better. And they almost are just as shocked as I am at how quickly their entire life turns around just from that shift.
Yeah. So I want to suggest that if you have been listening to the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast for a while, if you're working with a coach, a therapist, some other modality, if this conversation is resonating with you, if you're feeling stuck and you know that there's so much you want to accomplish in your life that you want to do with relationship, with profession, with your family, I would really encourage you to check out Sanaya and consider a couple of sessions. Her packages are in 3 sessions. She'll tell you about that in a moment. It is like peeling back an onion, so it might take more than 3 sessions, but unlike therapy, you're not committed for years or a lifetime. And I have found it to be nothing shy of miraculous with the issues that I've worked with. And the other thing is Sanaya, and I didn't want to lead with this, but I do want you, Sanaya, to talk about this. Sanaya has an entire business where and programs and services where she helps us grow into self-love, which I think is foundational for every one of us who found ourselves in these difficult marriages. And so, Sanaya, can you share a little bit about how people can find you for your theta healing, but also please share the other business that you have, because I think that for folks who are ready, it's a beautiful next step.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Karen. So you can find me on www.saniyahgurnamal.com. So you can learn a little bit more about what I do. If you'd like to book a call and learn about theta healing, you can go to relationshipclaritycall.com and book a 20-minute call with me, and we can talk about what theta healing can do for you. I do a lot of work with self-love and also helping women find their soulmates. As Karen said, it really is about self-love. It's about learning to love yourself, to meet your own emotional needs, and more importantly, letting go of all the baggage, all the past history, the emotional wounds that are really not allowing us to be who we want to be in our lives. And so my programs, whether that's self-love power or a soulmate magnet, or even the coaching that I do with Theta Healing, is aimed to help you live the life that you want and to have the love that you need, but learning to give it to yourself before you can receive it from other people. Because I found that how you love yourself is how you teach other people how to love you. And that relationship with yourself is the most important one. So I really focus on self-love, self-worth, and self-esteem as being the core themes in our lives that we have to make sure that we feel good about, we have sorted out in our lives. Once again, you can find me on YouTube, Sanaiyah Gurnamal, Instagram. So definitely drop me a DM or book a call, and I'd love to tell you a little bit more about what I do and how I can help you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and my podcast,
yes,
Karen, my
please.
podcast. Yes, I have a podcast. It's called Project Loving Myself. So you can also follow the podcast. It's on all podcasting platforms.
Yeah, so all of those links are in the show notes. You can go and grab what you like. Certainly add Sanaya's podcast to your playlist so that you've got that on automatic. And Sanaya, I love chatting with you. I'm just over the moon about the work that you do and how you've helped me and so many of my clients. And so thank you for coming and sharing with our more extended audience today, and really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for having me.
And we'll be back again real soon. So you guys have a great day. Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.